Good morning everybody and welcome to the Caulfield Racecourse for this special Channel 7 telecast. This morning we're celebrating the life of Bill Collins. Bill passed away on the weekend. I think he's the most outstanding sports commentator this country has produced. Every race caller I've ever spoken to has been touched and influenced by Bill Collins. Nobody could call a race like him. He had the voice, he had the rhythm, he could rise to the occasion, and many of his calls over that 35-year period are now classics. But Bill wasn't just a race caller, as you're going to discover today. He was multi-talented. And more than all of that, he was an absolute gentleman, a person who was very generous with his time and also his advice. I wanted to be here today, and so did Channel 7. And many of Bill's colleagues, both on camera and behind the camera, have made it to Caulfield this morning, including Gary Gray, our Master of Ceremonies.
William Henry Collins was born in Trafalgar, Gippsland, Victoria, on September 23, 1928, the only child of Henry and Linda Collins. Dad was a small-time bookie in the district. When Bill's dad would take him along to the local race meetings, nobody could possibly have known that the skinny young fellow would make more impact on Australian racing than any other media personality in its history. Nor could the crowd at the little track of Lindenau have believed that when Bill called his first race at 15 as a stand-in, because the local caller hadn't turned up, that the voice they heard would be a voice and a style synonymous with racing for 40 years. Or even more, that Bill would become one of the most versatile and complete showmen Australia had ever known. Bill died peacefully and at peace last Saturday. Today we're here to celebrate his wonderful life. Bill Collins, a humble man, a gentle man, a kind man, a generous man, a gambling man, a happy man, a private man, a witty man, a brilliant man, a good bloke. Bill Collins only made friends, not enemies. And many of those friends are here today. One of Bill's particular friends was the late Sir John Dillon. Two of Sir John's sons are priests. Both of them are here with us today. Father Kevin Dillon will now lead us in a reflection and a prayer.
We come together to remember, to laugh, to be thankful, but also to pray. In this hour, we will be reminded of Bill's fine example of how life should be lived. Let us begin today by asking God, in whatever way we know him and honour him in our hearts, to take Bill to himself, to give comfort and hope to his family and to all who will miss him so dearly. And we pray, God our Father, we have come together to pay tribute to our friend Bill, to remember what he has meant to us in life, to give thanks for the example he has given to us all, and to commend him into your tender and loving care. Lord, hear the prayer we offer on behalf of Bill, whom you have called from this life to yourself. He has put his trust and hope in you. May he be carried safely home to heaven, and may he enjoy your eternal reward. We ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen. These brief prayers of intercession now invite you to respond after the words, Lord, hear us. Just respond with the words, Lord, hear our prayer. In his concern for the needs of the elderly and the less privileged, Bill gave clear evidence of his warm and compassionate heart, combined with a practical ability to assist wherever he could. May God reward him for his generosity of spirit and his gentleness of heart. Lord, hear us.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Many will speak today with accuracy of Bill's numerous talents, which brought enjoyment, laughter, and admiration to so many over several decades. We are thankful for these gifts of Bill, and we pray that his use of his talents may be a helpful example to each of us to make similar use of our own abilities. Lord, hear us.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Of the many accolades appropriately being paid to Bill, the most significant are those which speak of his love for his family, his loyal and gracious friendship given to so many. May the Lord help us to cherish the irreplaceable value of family in our own lives, and may we know and live true friendship in our dealings with one another. Lord, hear us. Loss of Bill is keenly felt by us all because of his integrity, his character, and his basic human decency and goodness. We pray that God will look on him with love and give him eternal life as a fitting reward for his true and faithful Christian spirit. Lord, hear us. Bill's son John will now read from the letter of St. James, a very beautiful reading speaking of the value of the true Christian human spirit.
If there are any wise or learned men among you, let them show it by their good lives, with humility and wisdom in their actions. The wisdom that comes down from above is essentially something pure. It also makes for peace and is kindly and considerate. It is full of compassion and shows itself by doing good. Nor is there any trace of partiality or hypocrisy in it. Peacemakers, when they work for peace, sow the seeds which will bear fruit in holiness. This is the word of the Lord.
Bill had a rich and varied life, full of achievement. This morning we'll take a canter through the years, and some of Bill's friends will share their memories with us. The Honourable Tom Reynolds, Minister for Sport and Racing, worked closely with Bill over the past decade. Bill was a committed Victorian who served the people of this state in the same generous way that he'd entertained them. In '85, Bill became the first racing media representative to be appointed to the board of a statutory authority when he joined the Harness Racing Board.
Robin, John, Deborah, Linda and friends. Imagine, you will, last Saturday morning as the finishing post loomed near for our dear friend. The great race caller in the sky made one of his biggest calls. And Bill Collins races into human immortality. It's not hard to imagine, is it? Because even more than Bone Crusher and the many other outstanding thoroughbreds that his calls helped immortalise, Bill was truly a legend in his own lifetime. Bill was born to be a race caller, and so he became the greatest ever. He was born an entertainer, so he became one of the pioneers of television. He was willing to try anything. He broadcast races from London and Washington, covered the Olympics in Melbourne, Montreal and Moscow, dressed up as a woman on Sunny Side Up, called the first VFL Grand Final on television in 1956 and became president of his beloved South Melbourne Football Club. In January 1988, Bill's outstanding contribution, spanning 2 complementary fields of endeavour, was duly recognised when he was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for service to the media and the racing industry. But it would have been even more appropriate for the accolade to have been for service to his fellow man. Because quite apart from his unparalleled professional record, Bill was simply one of the nicest blokes you could meet, who'd happily go out of his way for others. He didn't care about your background, your place in society, or political persuasion, nor did he need to be in the spotlight, as evinced by his extensive charitable work. As chairman of the Greyhound Racing Control Board, a position he held until the end, and for 10 years and 5 weeks, Bill listened to all points of view, weighed up the options, thought carefully about the best tactics, and lobbied effectively on the most important issues. And the greyhound industry made great progress under his leadership. That was typical of the way he worked with all three racing codes, his various media commitments, other sporting clubs, hospitals and charities. Always concerned, always helpful, always subtle, and above all, always effective. On behalf of all those, including myself, who dealt with Bill on a formal level through his positions on the Harness Racing Board, the board of the TAB, as a director of Radio 3UZ, or Sport 927 as known now, chairman of the Australian and New Zealand Greyhound Racing Association, chairman of the Greyhound Racing Control Board, and more recently as a member of the review panel into sports betting, we reflect on dealing with a man of intelligence, integrity, commitment, passion, warmth and humility. And so today we say farewell to a great Australian who touched the lives of so many. And each and every one of us is the richer for having known him. His sphere of influence reached the highest echelons of public life. And I now invite you to listen to a message that the Premier has sent from Dublin.
Robin, members of Bill's family and all of his friends and associates gathered there today. I'm terribly sorry to have heard of Bill's passing, and I regret because I'm overseas I can't be with you. I guess there are few people who during their lifetime are judged or deemed by their peers to have been highly successful, not only at their profession, but as contributors to broader community. And Bill, both professionally and in terms of what he did for others in society less fortunate than us, has already been judged to have been at the leading edge of his profession and community service. But there are even fewer Australians who are deemed and remembered after their life to set an example for others who follow them professionally. And Bill's professionalism throughout his life will always be a standard for others to emulate, both through their lives and ultimately in the training of those further down the track. To you, Robin, to your children, to the very many friends that I know that will be assembled there today, I wish you all well in this difficult period, but quite obviously you have a great deal to be proud of.
I'll feel nervous. I'll have a lot of thoughts of the 33 Cups that have gone before it, Peter, and I hope I get it right, and you know, knowing it'll be my last Melbourne Cup call, it's going to be a bit of a sad day for me as well.
Lawrence Costin was Bill's studio coordinator for many of those great radio years at radio station 3DB, where it all began. Bill joined Radio 3DB in 1953 as a third-string race caller to Eric Welsh and Dick Cranbourne. Bill was appointed chief race caller in 1954, and he held the reins at DB until 1988.
Gary, Robin, friends of Bill Collins. Yes, I worked with Bill at 3DB for 30 years, and you know, in all that time, he never changed. He never pulled a tantrum, never spent the dummy. Despite his fame, he never had any airs and graces, never had any tickets on himself. He was just a real nice bloke. He was nice to the rich, and he was nice to the poor. As Gary said, my close association with Bill came about because I coordinated the 3DB racing service every Saturday with Bill at the track. Now, it goes without saying that Bill was a fantastic race caller. But can I tell you about the time Bill called a race in slow motion? It was at the track here at Caulfield about 25 years ago. I was in the studio and I'd crossed to Bill for each event. Well, it came to race 5 on the card, It's 2 minutes to post time, and there's no sign of Bill Collins in the broadcast box. Well, I'm starting to panic, as at that time 3DB was in fierce competition with 3UZ, and we looked like missing the race the first leg of the double. Well, I've got the line up from Caulfield in the headphones. I can hear Joe Brown in the background calling the horses into line. Now, just at that moment, a breathless Bill Collins burst into the broadcast box and yelled down the line, "Come over, Laurie, come over, I'm here." Well, I breathe a sigh of relief and say, "Over to Bill Collins at Caulfield for race 5. Now, just as I crossed, the horses jumped and Bill started to broadcast the race, but he was terribly out of breath. He identified the horses all right, no problem there at all. But after naming each horse, he'd take a gulp of air, he'd take a deep breath, and it sounded like he was calling the race in slow motion. Well, I'm listening to the race back at the studio and I'm a little bewildered. I'm thinking, gee whiz, there's not much pace on in this race. Or else they're very slow horses. But Bill got through it in his usual unruffled and professional manner, and all he said at the finish was, "Sorry about that, but I think I need a new watch." Well, now it transpired Bill had been in the betting ring, as it was his wont between races. He looked at his watch, he saw there was still 10 or 12 minutes to go before the start of the next race. But about a minute later, he heard Joe Brown say in the public address, "They're moving in rapidly for the Malakoff Stakes." And that's when Bill realised that his watch had stopped. Well, he left that betting ring at 100 miles an hour. He raced up the stairs to the broadcast box, and of course, when he got there, he was all out of breath. Now, every broadcaster will know that to speak on an open mic when you're out of breath is a terrifying experience. For a race commentator, it would be an absolute nightmare. And for those race callers in the audience at Caulfield today, they would know exactly what I mean. But you know, that's just one of the great memories I have of Bill Collins. And we're going to miss him terribly, aren't we? Thank you.
Top fashion styles like mine, just $85. These are just some of the crazy suit prices during Wardrop's 10-day suit clearance.
Gerald Carrington was finance director and managing director at Channel 7 for many years. By 1956, Bill was a radio star. Much more than a race caller, he was a singing, dancing, joke-telling vaudevillian. Television came, Bill didn't miss a beat. TV was no problem for the unflappable one. Gerald Carrington remembers Bill as a key factor in Channel 7's success.
Robin and members of your family, I'm honoured to be here today to join in this public celebration of Bill's life, and I think we do really ought to celebrate it, because it's one that deserves to be celebrated. But I'm also here as a very inadequate replacement for another great legend of Australian sport, radio and television, Ron Casey. Unfortunately, Casey's doctors have decided he should remain at home today, and I don't need to tell you how much Casey regrets that. You know how he likes to be there. But he's with us here in spirit, at least. In 1966, I was transferred from being finance editor of The Sun to be finance director of Channel 7. Television was very new to me. It had been going 10 years, but already Bill was a superstar of TV. He had a giant and multifaceted natural talent, Bill. Yet he was always a simple, natural man. Bill may best be remembered by the audience here today as a legend among race callers, as the accurate one. But at Channel 7, he was the compere of Sunny Side Up. He did sketch comedies with Sid Hollis and Buster Fidesz, tripped the light fantastic and sang songs. Robin also featured in the program as a leading dancer. Often Bill would do sports segments on the evening news and go out and call the trots. He covered the Olympic Games in Melbourne in '56, went to Montreal in '76 and Moscow in 1980. But most of all, I guess his leading role in Seven was in Australia's longest running television show, World of Sport, which ran for over 25 years. In other words, to those of us in the game, he was one of Case's boys. His spirit was always willing, even when the hours of work were very long. It's from the World of Sport period I'd like to tell you a yarn or two about Bill. One Sunday morning, Lou had come down to World of Sport, as was his wont. He had a great idea. We should put a syndicate together to buy a hotel down at Williamstown. Lou talked to me because he thought I knew a bit about finance, so we worked out with Jack Dyer, Bob Davis, Jack Elliott, Ron Casey, Lou Richards, Uncle Doug Elliott, and I think Bob Skilton, we needed to put in about 10,000 each to buy the pub. Bill was down on the studio floor doing his segment, and when he finished, he came up the stairs, walked into Case's office, and Lou ran up to him and said, "Oh, Bill," he said, "have you got 10,000? And then Bill's true punter remark said, "Louis, some days yes, some days no." Then there was the day down on the World of Sport floor. Ron Casey was getting, as he was wont to do from time to time with Uncle Doug, you remember dear old Uncle? He used to do those commercials. He had a row of blazers and a row of caps. He'd do the Patra orange juice, the Bataki, small goods, etc., etc. And old Uncle used to love to creep a few extra seconds for his favourite advertisers. It used to get Case a bit red around the gills. And Case this day was getting a bit tired of Uncle's running over time, and Bill said to Case, he said, "Don't worry, Case," he said, "I'll fix him." In those days, Uncle Doug's commercials used to be written on a large sheet of butcher's paper, and the boys would hold the butcher's paper up while Uncle read the commercial. Uncle Doug starts his next commercial, and Bill walks across and just gets his cigarette lighter and flicks at the bottom of the butcher's paper. That commercial went to air, I think, in 20 seconds. Then there was the day Gary Fenton had a ride in Bill's car. They went over a bump and the glove box dropped open. And there was over 40 pay packets full of cash, all fell out of Bill's glove box onto the floor. But that was Bill. Bill, whether angels compete by flying, whether they go into the gallops or race chariots, I'm sure you've already sized up the scene. Seven would love a novel sports program, again with you as compere and caller. Vale, longum vale, Bill, from all your friends at Seven. You've earned a good rest. Thank you.
The machine has jammed with the trots in it, and so I think we'll show you the cards. Let's have a look at the cards of all results on the program anyway.
Lou Richards was a vital part of the team at Channel 7 in those heady, pioneering TV days. One of our enduring memories of Sunday mornings in the 60s, 70s and 80s was World of Sport. A bunch of good-natured larrikins getting together to talk about sport. Bill was in his element, so was Louis.
Well, Bill was not only Australia's greatest race caller, there's no doubt about that. He was also Mr. Versatile when it came to radio and television, but Bill had a great sense of humour too, as Jerry Carrington and Lawrence Costin mentioned before. Because I reckon Bill, with his funny sense of humour, has organised this cold day for us all to be here. And he's up there laughing his head off. But I've known Bill over 30 years at DB, firstly with Sports Forum, and then when we got to World of Sport, which was a highly intellectual show, as you all know, and I had to give the presents away to the guests on the program, I used to try and come in with a one-liner. And sometimes I couldn't get a one-liner, and I'd always go to Bill and he'd always have one for me. Anyway, we had this Japanese bloke on the show this day being interviewed. And I said to Bill, "Can you give me a one-liner for this fellow?" And he said, "Yeah, say something in Japanese." Because I was very fluent with Japanese in those days. So he gave me something to say in Japanese, and the next thing I know, the bloke looked at me and I thought he was going to hit me right across the head with his samurai sword, because Bill thought that was funny. And Uncle Doug Elliott was a great eater. And Doug used to always, Robin used to make a ham sandwich for Bill every day, and he used to eat it before the show, a ham and mustard sandwich. And just before the show started, Bill would have his sandwich, but Doug would walk over and take half of the sandwich, and this was getting under Bill's guard. So he said, I'll fix him up. So what Bill did, he got a square piece of the running sheet, that's the show's running sheet, and tucked it under the ham and put the bread back again and put it back in the lunch wrap that they had there. And Doug came down, Bill picked up his bit. He said, over to your sandwich, Bill, and Bill said, yes, Doug, go for it. Anyway, Doug ate the sandwich, the paper and all, and we thought it was a great joke with Bill, because he'd eat anything, Doug. And Bill, as you all know, loved his cards and the South Melbourne football team. And he was a good judge of football, because week after week, he used to take money off me. And that proved one thing for me for sure, that I wasn't a good judge of football. But at any rate, Bill was a great bloke and did everything that made you happy, and he was a great friend for me, and I loved the man. And of course, we had lots of fun, and I bet now Bill is up there in heaven, and he's organising a game of solo, and he's playing Matthew, Mark, Luke and John and whipping the pants off them. I just say this to you, Bill, God bless you, we all loved you.
Didn't you go to school?
Oh, yes, but I was no good at spelling at school.
Why not?
Oh, well, the teacher kept changing the words all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Shirlene Clancy knew a different Bill, I suppose. Shirlene was one of the team at Sunny Side Up, a Friday night tradition on Channel 7 for lovers of variety. What a variety. Names like Joey Porter, Sid Halen, Sid Hollister, Honest John Gilbert, Maury Fields, Val Gillay and Ron Lees. Bill was the host. Mr. Cool, our own Perry Como, or Bing Crosby, if you like. Shirlene was one of the lead singers.
Hello, everyone. I first met Bill many years ago in Sunny Side Up, and we have remained friends for many, many years. Just 18 months ago, we had the pleasure of working together again with a presented show called Memories of Sunny Side Up. During the show, Bill presented a special moment which captured every member of the audience. It was a poem which he wrote in just one night for a sports book. And this happened many years ago, but right now, I would like to read it for you. I'm no Bill Collins doing this, by the way, but still, I'll have a go. I stood on the Caulfield Racecourse. In my pocket was $2.10. I backed the winner of the first race. My luck was in again. I backed the winner of the second. And when it came to the third, they said the filly by showdown was the best next thing to a bird. She flew the stalls like an arrow, and when she dashed clear past the stand, the ticket I had in my pocket was worth the best part of $1,000. The next 3 races were easy. The favourites all won in a trot. And when it came to the last race, I decided to wager the lot. 13,800. My fancy was 7-1. By the time I was through, it was evens, and my moment of truth had begun. The professor bounced him out like a beauty, and soon he had him on the rail. The leaders were ripping and tearing. He was getting a beautiful trail. As they just came to the turn, he was bolting. He just needed a split, that was for sure. A furlong from home, and he got it. The crowd rose to their feet with a roar. The leader was fighting back gamely, but so was the favourite, by heck. The judge didn't call for a photo. I had landed the plunge by a neck. As the horses came back to the weigh-in, I could only think of just one thing. I'd arrived at the course with $2, yet I'd broken the whole flamin' ring. Next moment the siren was sounding. I know I went white as a ghost. A protest was lodged with the stewards for a bump 50 yards from the post. The next half hour was a nightmare. I bit my nails down to the quick. I thought I would never be over. I felt hot, I felt cold, I felt sick. The siren was once again sounding. The announcer came over, stand by. The whole of the racecourse was silent. I let out my breath with a sigh. Your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen. The words seemed to float through a mist. Your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen. The protest has been dismissed. Well, you could hardly imagine my feelings. The torture I'd suffered was through. I'd buy a big mansion in Turek. There were so many things I could do. Then I suddenly felt I was drowning. I let out a horrible scream, for I'd fallen to sleep in the bathtub, and the whole thing was only a dream. Well done, Mr. Collins. Now, in conclusion, I would like to tell you about what happened to me just recently. I went in to see Bill in the hospital, and he said, "Shirl, I've been thinking," the man is lying there very, very sick in bed. "Shirl, I've been thinking something that you should do." I said, "What's that, Bill?" He said, "I think you should buy yourself a greyhound." A greyhound? He said, "Yes, I'd like you to get involved with the greyhound racing." And I thought, all right. So I said goodbye, but whilst I was going down to my car, I could think of nothing else, but here he is lying so sick, and he wants me to buy a greyhound. Nevertheless, I think I will, Bill, and we may call it Sunny Side Up. In conclusion now, I've got to say that Bill to me was a great race caller, a great entertainer, but most of all, a great man and a thorough gentleman. I love you, Bill, and I'll never forget you. Thank you.
We're going to have a special table in here in the program next week, a blackjack table. We're going to have a blackjack shoe.
You're not allowed to do that. It's against the gaming rules.
Not if you don't play for money.
Well, there was much more to Bill's life than being in the limelight. Henry Harrison knows all about that. Bill never said no to a charity, a good cause, or just someone down on their luck. But perhaps Bill's proudest achievement is the Echo Foundation, which he founded and was president of for 18 years. Henry Harrison is the patron of Echo and a good mate of Bill's.
My association with Bill goes back to 1956, from the time when the late John Cade gave licences to non-proprietary greyhound racing. Bill Collins became part of it. There was many, many factors that Bill was covering, but one that nobody did hear very much about was his concern for elderly citizens. In the early 70s, there was a family in South Melbourne, Albert Park, the O'Hanlons. Jack O'Hanlon was a bookmaker who had a heart of gold. He was one of the very few people who really started to use, in a constructive way, the bingo. And he started working for the Catholic Church in South Melbourne, and they had bingo once or twice a week, and it went on from there. But he had also a great affinity with Bill Collins. Jack O'Hanlon took to Bill a proposal that they do something for the elderly citizens who used to attend all these bingo sessions. And so was this ECHO, which stands for Elderly Citizens Elderly Citizens Holiday Organisation. He took it to Bill Collins, and Bill Collins said, "Right, we've got to get some money to get it going." And he in turn took it to Sir John Dillon, who in turn took it to Henry Harrison, who was the president chairman of the Thoroughbred Club of Australia and also Sandown Grey Racing Club. He had a lot of people who he could call on to also start to run functions to raise money. Bill Collins had the ability to do things that you weren't allowed to do. That was his main forte. I remember well him saying to Sir John Dillon, "We'll run a Calcutta." Bill Collins said, "You can't, it's illegal." He said, "Oh, we'll get round it." They did, they run it. And Sir John Dillon couldn't go because he was frightened to get caught. Not only that, he used to, in his own way, run various types of organisations, raffles, all that you could do, but he had that ability, A, to raise money, and they raised money. And they bought a property down at Rye. They also got the likes of Gabby Farrer. I could name dozens and dozens and dozens of people who, charity-minded, put in to make this thing go. I would think that if you was to take all of the functions, all of the organisations, all of the associations that Bill Collins run, you'd have to say, where does he get the time? I'm just surprised that Robin ever saw him, because he was always doing something for somebody. He was an absolute magician. Right at the moment, I've got no doubt he's organising something. He's looking down at us down here, and he's saying, "Well, I bet you'll be in trouble. I'll get you out of it." There's no problems with that. All I could say is that this particular organisation, the Echo Foundation, now is in the hands of a committee that will no doubt at all carry on where Bill has had to let go. God bless you, Bill.
The night when whole lifetimes of plans, of sweat and of dreams suddenly are called to the barrier to face their moment of truth. Inter Dominion Grand Final night. It is the night of glory.
Claude Morrell knew Bill as a top-line sportsman. Claude is president of the Melbourne Bowling Club, and Bill loved his bowls. Not only that, he could really play. He was something to bet on, in fact, and I'm sure Bill did on a few occasions, Claude.
That's quite correct, Gary. I stand here as a friend of Bill's, I think, for 40 years. A lot closer over the last 7 or 8 when he took up bowls. Bill's always regretted that he didn't do the same thing 25, 30 years ago. He really took to it like a duck takes to water. He loved the bowls. He loved the enjoyment of playing, the sportsmanship. He was a great team man. In fact, I go back, I was chairman of selectors, I think 3 years ago. He came up apologising and said, "Oh, Lord, I can't play Derby Day. I've got to go to the Derby. I don't want to. I don't want to let the team down. But the VRC have asked me to come along as a special guest." And he was so apologetic. He was more worried about leaving his teammates in the lurch than going to the Derby. And he missed his first one 2 years before that. I think for something like 41 years he'd consecutively gone to the Derby. But bowls took over Bill's life, which you probably, people here wouldn't realise over the last 4 or 5 years. As Mr Harrison said, I don't think Robert ever saw him beforehand, but when he took over bowls, he's even worse. Bill thoroughly enjoyed the game, and he put a lot into it. We were in trouble at our club 2 years ago. We wanted some good driving force. Bill stood up, became president of our club and chairman of the board, and he put his heart and soul into that until his illness arrived last year. And even early this year, he came back in and helped a lot in what we're striving to do. The boys in bowls have really appreciated having him part of the bowling fraternity. As I said, it's a very short time. He wished he had more. The boys who go interstate with us and the Turf Carnival are going to miss he and Robin next year. I don't know if Robin might join us and come along. It's a great carnival, but Bill enjoyed it and all the people interstate enjoyed his company. He was just Bill Collins, not broadcaster, not anything else, just Bill Collins bowler when he got on these trips. He was a fantastic man. And for the boys from the bowling fraternity, particularly the Victorian Club bowlers and Melbourne Club particularly, we say fond farewell, Bill. You'll be greatly missed, particularly by Harry McDonald, who was his mentor player, partner, and everything they did so much together. There's a great bonding between those two, and myself particularly. It's been a privilege and an honour, Bill, to have been a friend of yours over all these years, and enjoy yourself in that big green on the sky. Thank you.
I can remember Melbourne winning the game very, very easily. The highlights are a bit obscure to me now, but, well, it was nice to think that I was the first to do a televised football match.
And that was your last match?
That was my last as well.
Bobby Skilton, a hero and legend, is a triple Brownlow medalist for Bill's beloved Bloods, or Swans as we now know them better. Bill was South Melbourne through and through. And he didn't just support them. When they hit a hurdle in 1981 as chairman, he led them through some difficult times. Bill and Bob really loved the red and white.
Robin, family, one could not but agree with everything that everyone has said about Bill Collins. He truly was one of nature's gentlemen. He carried that same warmth and affection into the love of his football club, South Melbourne. Red and white were Bill's football colours. In World of Sport days, football was just played on Saturdays. Bill, of course, was at the racetrack. Whoever from South Melbourne went to the World of Sport on the Sunday would be buttonholed by Bill, taken into the corner, and the game dissected. Everyone looked at, Bill knew exactly and wanted to know just what was going on. It mattered not whether we had won or whether we had lost. If we had lost, if we were down, there was always the words of encouragement. After a win, it was a simple, well done. It was in the early 80s, though, when Bill showed his true colours. Debt-ridden, the club may well have folded, or as it turned out, gone to Sydney. Whatever it was, the club was split right down the middle. There was the Keep South at South faction, there was the Move to Sydney faction. Similar to the recent merger talks of football clubs, great friends look like becoming bitter enemies. There is no right or wrong in those situations, as both sides believe they're doing the right thing for the club they love. The fact was, though, that red and white people were fighting with red and white people. That hurt Bill Collins and hurt him deeply. Rather than see that happen, or maybe should I say, see it continue, Bill stepped into the breach. He became the last president in Melbourne, the first president in Sydney. Always one to give his heart, his soul, his time, his energy. Bill became the mediator. Without Bill, things may well have fallen apart. Through it all, he maintained both his dignity and his independence. He may not have wanted the club to go to Sydney, but seeing the side last year, playing well right throughout, culminating in a grand final performance, I'm sure, I know, made Bill one very happy person. Delighted that the red and white were both won and successful, the knowledge that there may have been no red and white had it not been for the part that Bill had played when the crisis was really on. It was a pleasure to know Bill, a privilege to be his friend. As much as he loved the red and white, we too loved him.
The first Melbourne Cup in '54 was won by Rising Fast, who he scooped the pool that year, incidentally, won the Caulfield Cup, Cox Plate and the Melbourne Cup. No, I didn't ever really expect to do it. I just hoped, and to think this year, you know, it's the 34th. It just doesn't seem 34 years ago.
David Burke is chairman of the Victoria Racing Club and knew Bill for 40 years. This morning, David speaks to us on behalf of all codes of racing and lovers of racing.
I'm pleased to pay this tribute to the late Bill Collins on behalf of the racing industry. Not only was Bill a remarkable man, a great broadcaster and entertainer, he was a most capable sporting administrator. His contribution to the racing industry was enormous. He figured in all sections: thoroughbred racing, harness racing, greyhound racing, or as probably Bill would more properly call it, gallops, trots and dogs. He certainly established a record that would never be equalled, being on harness and greyhound racing boards, as well as making a great contribution to the industry through his membership of the Totalisator Agency Board before it being privatised, and through his membership of the board of our racing industry radio station, 3UZ and now Sport 927. Last year he received the Chester Manifold Award, a most prestigious honour awarded by the chairman of the Thoroughbred Racing Code to the person who has made a great contribution to racing. I know Bill was very thrilled to be honoured in this way, as only a few such awards have been made in recent years. I think one of Bill's great qualities was his humility. He never pushed himself into the limelight, though he was entitled to do so. He preferred to work behind the scenes to obtain his objectives. He was an inspiration to us all, and never once did he complain. The racing industry is all the poorer for his passing, and we extend deepest sympathy to Robin and members of the family. Thank you.
Crowd running on, Bone Crusher responds to the whip, the roars of the crowd. He races up to our Waverley Star, 100 out, Bone Crusher, our Waverley Star, stride for stride, nothing in it. Our Waverley Star, the rails, Bone Crusher the outside, and Bone Crusher races into equine immortality.
Brian Martin is probably the luckiest race caller ever born. Brian worked for many of his formative years at 3UZ under the great Bert Bryant, and later at 3DB under Bill. Bill was the patriarch, the mentor, the idol and friend to so many young race callers. Today, the #1 caller at Sport 927, Brian speaks to us on behalf of a fraternity, but Bill Collins was the #1. The race callers, and of course, the racing media.
Thank you, Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1937, Bill Collins, then 9 years of age, hid in a tree to avoid going to the dentist. The reason was simply this: he wanted to hear the Melbourne Cup. Jim Carroll from the ABC delivered the call with one great line: "The trump is finishing like a shot out of a gun." Bill Collins, for 35 years, gave us the perfect line year in and year out. Bill was the tutor, the advisor, the father figure to so many from our profession. Everyone was equal. Bill Collins was never the opposition. Bill's advice was special. He would say to us to imagine that we were calling to a blind person. Always try and paint the picture in a race call. That we try. Bill did it so superbly. He, like those before him, mastered the public address. And how many times did we hear at Caulfield, hear Bill Collins say, "Your attention please, ladies and gentlemen." Everything stopped and you knew something serious was about to be announced. Now, many was the time that I'd see Bill run into the broadcast box alongside me when working for 3UZ. He'd be puffing, probably stubbing out a Willem too, take off his coat and his hat, and he'd learn the colours in 3 minutes and get the call perfect. He was amazing. Bill called the Melbourne Cup in 1954, won by Rising Fast, as well as he called the last of 34, won by Kenzai and Larry Olsen in 1987. He never missed a beat. The Collins era has been so special for us, particularly the race callers here in Australia. Bill has created the benchmark to which we all now aspire. The work on the racetrack of Bill Collins was admired all around the world. For over 4 decades, Bill kept pace with radio, the advent of black and white television, the arrival of colour. He called the codes with, that's all 3 codes, with enormous flair and with energy. His input to race broadcasting over 40 years is impossible to measure. He was simply the best. Our profession is so much richer for his presence. Rest in peace, Accurate One.
You know, I always compare the Australian Cup to the W.S. Cox Plate in the galloping world. I don't think any poor performer has ever won the race.
Les Carline knew Bill for more than 30 years. Bill's unique style of race broadcasting added inspiration to many of the brilliant newspaper features that Les has written. Les always believed that Bill's talent was not just his ability to accurately describe a race, it was much more. It was something special.
Robin and family, I first met Bill more than 30 years ago, and I didn't have as much to do with him as some here today, but I think I knew him well enough to know he'd be a touch confused by this quite astonishing and wonderful scene here today at what, after all, was his favourite racecourse. I can see him heading for the broadcasting box, balancing that cup of tea and 2 biscuits on a saucer. And I can see him pause, and I can see those bright lights go on in his eyes. And I can hear him say in that world-weary voice of his, "Beats me what they're trying to do here today. A grandstand full of people, freezing cold, and not a tote window open anywhere." Bill liked to bet. But I guess what we're trying to do here today is remember the things that truly matter. And one of these is that Bill is special to us because, above all, he was good at his craft. So good as to be peerless. So good as to transcend racing itself. So good he took racing to all the people. Maybe they didn't know the difference between a false favourite and a running double, but they knew who Bill Collins was, and they knew he was good to listen to. I remind you of just one race, Bone Crusher and Waverley Star in the Cox Plate. Now that race got a going over again quite recently for its 10th anniversary, but given a decade to think about it, no one came up with better words then than Bill produced on the day and in a split second. Race callers have no scripts, no auto cues, no leisurely deadlines. Just a split second to find 5 or 6 words that are just right. And you can't listen to that call of Bill's without feeling a chill. You can't but wonder how someone could reel off so effortlessly what amounted to instant literature. Think of the clarity of his voice that day. Think of those rich images he painted for us, how his voice rose with every shift in that battle, and how he made race calling just seem like some happy accident, and how, in a divine instant, his voice exhausted, he produced that line, "And Bone Crusher races into equine immortality." Immortality. And of course he didn't just do it that day, he did it here, he did it everywhere. Bill was unique, not just in Melbourne, not just in Australia, but in the world. He captured the moment, then he went and had a cup of tea. Someone once said we only die when we fail to take root in others. Those of us who love sport will always hear Bill calling races in our minds. And if that's true, then yes, he too is immortal. Thank you.
Les Kylon, and what a beautiful celebration. This has been a wonderful moment for Bill's family, Robin and the children here today, and we reflect back, and I said at the beginning of the program how Bill had touched every race caller I'd ever spoken to, and so many different areas of television and radio. When I was a young boy growing up in Adelaide, when I was asked when I was going to school what I wanted to be, it wasn't just a race caller, I wanted to be Bill Collins. As an 11-year-old, I wrote to him from Adelaide and said, "Dear Mr. Collins, how do I become a race caller? I want to call a Melbourne Cup just like you." Bill wrote back to me, and for the rest of my life, I guess, as a broadcaster, I've been trying to emulate Bill Collins like every one of us have been trying to do, but there was only one of his. His calls, we talked about Bone Crusher a moment ago in 1986 with Waverley Star. I was calling in the box alongside of him that day. And also about 3 months later in the Australian Cup, when Bone Crusher got up to beat At Talak, I thought I'd done a pretty good call. I got the photo wrong. Bill, as always, got it just right. I think those two calls and many of those other famous ones will be with us forever. He meant so much to us at Channel 7. He's a legend at HSV. He could ad-lib like nobody else, and he was just a great guy who wasn't intimidated by anything and was prepared to give so much of himself to so many of us. We're going to miss him, but I think we've given him a great farewell today, and I hope you've enjoyed it here on Channel 7 from Caulfield. As we said a moment ago, this was his famous racecourse, perhaps his favourite one. He left us with so many terrific memories. Goodbye from Caulfield.